Hello and welcome back to the world's tightest community. I am your host, Mathilde, and today I want to talk to you about the future of this podcast and how we can continue bringing these conversations to you. But before I get into that, I want to tell you about something that happened to me recently because I think it sets the stage for everything I want to say in this episode. So, a little bit of context first. As some of you know, I started experiencing vulvar pain about 5 years ago when I was 25. I was living in the UK at the time, and that is where I got diagnosed. That is where I started treatment, and that is where I started actually putting the pieces of the puzzle together. I have since partially moved back to Norway, which is where I'm from. I'm traveling a lot of back and forth to the US, but the plan is to move back here over time. I am a lot better than I was 5 years ago, like really meaningfully better, but I'm not fully healed. I still experience pain during sex. I still have some pain with tampons. I still need ongoing care, basically. So this past December, I went to my GP here in Norway, my general practitioner, and I asked for a referral to a specialist gynecologist so that I could start getting care here in Norway. Because the way it works here, if you want to see a gynecologist on the public healthcare system, you have to be referred by your GP. So fair enough, he started initiating the process. He sent over my medical records from the UK, my Vulvodynia diagnosis, the medications I tried, the pelvic floor physio I'd done, like my full medical history. And then I didn't hear anything back for a while. So in February, I got a letter from a specialist vulvar clinic that said that my referral had been declined because to be seen there, I needed to be referred by a gynecologist and not a GP. Okay, fine. I assumed it was just a bureaucratic thing. So I messaged my GP, got him on a call, and the first thing he says to me is, and I'm translating from Norwegian here, yeah, unfortunately, it looks like you've been a victim of being thrown around in the system. And then he tells me what had actually been happening. So he had sent my request to see a specialist to several different hospitals and gynecology practices in the area, and I had been refused by all of them. This was 3 hospitals and 4 clinics, and all of them said no. And I asked him, like, why? Why would they refuse me? And he said, well, they probably don't know how to treat you, so they just refuse you. And that's their prerogative. Now, let that sink in. I have a diagnosis. I have a clear medical history. I have already done significant work on this with specialists in the UK. I probably know more about my own condition than most people who walk into a clinic. And I was refused by 7 different practices and hospitals because they didn't know how to treat me. And then my GP, who is, by the way, genuinely incredible, he's just an amazing doctor who's not giving up on this, went directly to this specialist vulvar clinic, the one that had initially declined me. And he had explained the whole situation to them that this patient has a diagnosis. She has been treated abroad. She cannot get a gynecologist to take her. Can you please make an exception to your referral rules and approve the referral from me? And they said no. And I want to add another layer to this because I keep thinking about it. So I live in Oslo, which is the capital of Norway. I am literate. I know what this is. I know roughly what I need or who I need to see. I have a diagnosis. I have a treatment history. I've done lots of reading. I am, by any reasonable measure, one of the better equipped patients to walk into a Norwegian medical system with this condition and get the help that I need. And I am in the capital where the resources are concentrated, where the specialists are based. If anyone in this country has the best possible conditions to get the care they need, it should be me, and it's still not good enough. So I want you to hold that for a second, because if this is happening to me in Oslo, in Norway, one of the richest countries in the world, what is happening to the woman in a smaller town several hours outside the city? What about the woman who doesn't have the language for her own diagnosis yet? who can feel that something isn't right but doesn't have the words for it? What about the woman who hasn't read the research, who's just trying to describe pain to a doctor who doesn't want to deal with it? Like, it is just not good enough. And it made me so angry. And I want to be clear, I'm not angry at my GP. He's been working really hard on this and doing so much paperwork to try to get me to someone who will actually accept me. I am just furious at a system that is so structurally broken around women's pain that even someone with a referral, a diagnosis, and an extremely advocating doctor cannot get in the door. Like, this is the reality. This is what 1 in 4 women is up against. And it is a huge part of why I do this. And I know that I'm not going to solve all of this by doing a podcast. I want to be really clear about that. This is a huge, deeply systemic problem. There are amazing people doing amazing work on it, clinicians, researchers, advocates, organizations, and what they are building is real, and it's going to take all of us pushing in the same direction for what I would imagine to be quite a long time. But I do believe, really, really, really believe that there is a specific role for these conversations. And the more I do this, the more clearly I see what that role actually is. So there are 3 things I think this type of platform needs to do. The first is helping patients understand what is happening in their own bodies, because once you understand what may be driving your pain, what treatments exist, what questions to ask, you can advocate for yourself. You can walk into an appointment and hold your own. That is the difference between getting refused by 7 clinics and hospitals and giving up, and getting refused by 7 clinics and hospital and finding the 8th. And the second, I think, is helping medical and healthcare practitioners better understand these conditions. And I want to say that I am genuinely so lucky that there are several medical practitioners and healthcare practitioners listening to this podcast. And that brings me an enormous sense of purpose, because if even one clinician walks away from an episode learning something new and treating their next patient with just a little bit more knowledge, that really matters. That is a real outcome. And then the third, which I'm really passionate about, is mainstream attention, because this is where it all eventually has to land. These conditions are still nowhere near where they need to be in the public conversation. And without that attention, the funding does not follow, the research does not follow, the political will does not follow. So I have been very intentional in my strategy with this podcast first, and going quite deep and going quite narrow in terms of bringing quite in-depth information on these types of conditions to the people who need them most. But I feel very passionately about the fact that we need to go broader than that as well, to really raise awareness at a high level, so that those people who may be dealing with pain but don't have any idea that it has a name, or just in general raising awareness in the general population about this, I think is incredibly important. And it's something that I think about a lot. So when I talk about the future of this podcast, that is the frame I want you to hold. I have big ambitions for this. I'm not building a side project. I'm trying to build something that contributes meaningfully to all 3 of those things: patient knowledge, clinician knowledge, and mainstream attention. And to keep doing that, I need to figure out the funding piece. So let me take you back briefly to how this all started. So I started this podcast about a year ago because I had been just desperately looking for answers and also a sense of community, and I just could not find them. I was experiencing this thing that was reshaping every part of my life, and I was looking around for someone who represented what I was going through, and I just could not find anyone. So I started talking to people, and I started doing the research, and I started realizing how much was out there that just was not reaching the people who needed it. And at the time, I was working in M&A and in finance in London, and I started this podcast on the side. And I did both for a few months, the day job and this. And after a while, it just became really clear to me that this is what I felt that I was meant to be doing. So I quit. I took a real trust fall. I saved up enough money to sustain myself and self-fund this podcast for about a year. And I had no idea if it was going to work, but I truly believed that these conversations needed to exist, and I just went for it. And I'll tell you, that was one of the scariest things I've ever done. I am generally quite risk averse when it comes to finances. I've always been a saver, like a chronic saver, ever since I was a child. So leaning into my instinct and just trying this out was a very, very scary thing for me. And we are now about a year in, and these conversations are luckily reaching more and more of you. They seem to be helping you understand what may be causing your pain, what treatments exist, how common this actually is, and I hope giving you a place where you feel like you belong. And again, I have very large ambitions for where this goes. There is so much more to build. And we are building up a really engaged community of people who care about this and want to push the mission forward. And I'm now at the stage where to keep doing this, I need to bring in some funding because my personal runway is running out. So I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I want to walk you through where I've actually landed because there are a few different paths that I'm exploring, and I want to be transparent about all of them. But before I get into the specific options, I want to say one more thing about what I think this podcast is actually for. Because again, I know that I'm not going to solve all the structural problems we just talked about through this podcast. Like, by no means. That is not what I think I'm doing. But I do think there is real value in bringing forward the people who are doing great contributions to this field. The clinicians, the researchers, the innovators, the people doing genuinely cool, important things in this space, because highlighting them, giving them a platform, putting their work in front of you, I think actually helps. And we need to be working collectively on this huge problem. And a platform like this can be a small but a meaningful part of how that happens. And again, I have big ambitions for what this platform will eventually become, and I'm really excited about bringing some new stuff to you. But for now, where it sits is raising awareness of what is out there. It is helping you understand your body. It is platforming the people doing the work. And honestly, I think it's also bringing some much needed hope and lightness to a topic that for many of us has just felt really, really dreary for a long time. And I think that matters too. Okay, so with that as a frame, here's what I'm actually exploring. And let me start with the one I keep getting suggested and the one that I don't think I'll ever do, which is write a PDF, like put information behind the paywall. And I want to explain why, because it's actually multifaceted. Firstly, the conditions that we talk about on this podcast are unfortunately complex. There's no single thing that helps with vulvovaginal pain. There's no one protocol. And the whole premise of this podcast is that the path through is generally individual, that the research matters, that the specialists matter, that you need to understand what's actually driving the pain in order to effectively treat it. And a PDF that says, here are 5 things to try is just not that helpful, in my opinion. It is the same reductionism that has failed this community for decades. And the last thing I'm going to do is replicate that with my own logo on it. And then secondly, and this is honestly the bigger reason, is that I have an uncompromising value that this information should be free for every woman who needs it. It should not be gate-kept behind a paywall that only some people can afford. So whatever the funding model ends up looking like, the content itself stays exactly where it is. It will be free, it will be available to anyone, and that part is not up for discussion. Okay, so with that being said, here is where I've actually landed. The first option, and the one that feels most natural for how this podcast works, is brand sponsorships. And I want to be transparent with you that I am already in active conversations with a few companies that I feel really, really aligned with, brands that are doing great things in this space with values that match what we are doing here, and companies where I genuinely think that this could be a win for everyone involved, for them, for me, and most importantly, for you. That said, I would still love to hear from you. If there is a brand you love, a product you swear by, a company you think really gets this community, please tell me. You can comment, you can DM, you can send me a voice note, because the sponsorships I will bring in will only ever be the ones I can stand behind completely. That part is non-negotiable to me, but finding the right ones is something that we can keep doing together. The second one I want to talk about is something I've actually been going back and forth on for a while. And after also conversations with some of you, I have now decided to open up the option for people to contribute directly to this project if they feel called to. So I will set up a Patreon or something similar. I'll add the link in the show notes. And I want to be really clear about a few things. First, this is completely optional. I fully understand that contributing financially is not available for everyone, and I do not want anyone to feel any kind of pressure about it. The podcast itself will stay exactly the same for everyone, whether you contribute or not. But if you do feel called to support this mission and if you have the means, I would love that. And I've also put together what I think are some really fun little gifts for people who choose to support on a monthly basis. So if that sounds like something you want to be part of, then please go check it out. And then the third thing that I'm actively looking into also is grants. Now, this type of podcast may be eligible for receiving support from some foundations or public bodies who see the value in bringing this type of information to the general public. So I'm working my way through which ones might actually be applicable to a project like this. And this is where I would also love your help. If any of you, whether you work in this space or you've just stumbled across something, know of any foundations or grants that you think could be a fit, then please send them my way. I will follow up on everything. And in general, if you have any creative ways where we can come together and keep this podcast going, please let me know. I'm very open to creative ways in which we can approach this as well. And yeah, honestly, I feel really optimistic. I want you to know that. I'm not coming on here in a panic. I'm coming on here from a place of feeling genuinely hopeful that we can make this work. This information should be free for every woman who needs it. That is the uncompromising part. And from what you tell me in messages and DMs and the conversations that I have with you week after week, I know this work matters to you. So I just want to find ways that work for all of us. The mission is bigger than the funding model. The mission is what we are doing this for. And I am excited, actually really excited about what the next chapter of this looks like. So if you have a brand you love, send it my way. If you know of a grant, send it my way. If you want to support directly, the link will be in the show notes. And if all you can do right now is keep on listening and maybe sharing this episode, rating the podcast, subscribing, that is also enough. That is a lot, actually. So thank you for being here. Thank you for trusting me with this. And I will see you in the next episode.